Hello, everyone. My name is Molly Sachs, and on behalf of Campbell & Company, I would like to welcome you to Building a Strong Board with the Nominating and Governance Committee. Thank you for joining us today. Before we begin today's presentation, I'd like to quickly go through some logistics for those of you who may be new to our webinars. Next slide, please. Close any programs other than GoToWebinar that are running on your computer. We recommend calling in with a phone instead of using your computer speakers. If you experience visual issues, send a chat to Campbell & Company or contact GoToWebinar at the number on your screen. Today's webinar will last 60 minutes, and you'll earn 1 continuing education credit that is good with your participation with CFRE International. Within the next 24 hours, you'll receive an email from GoToWebinar that includes information on how to download your certificate. In that same follow-up email, you'll also receive a link to download today's slides, along with a link to the recording. We do welcome questions throughout the webinar, so please use the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel that should be on the right side of your computer screen. We'll hold time at the end of the webinar for Q&A. And with that, I will turn it over to our presenters today on the next slide. Peter Fissinger, President and CEO of Campbell & Company, and Amy Carbone, Nominating and Governance Committee Chair for YMCA of Metropolitan Chicago.
Thank you, Molly. I just want to check, can you hear me okay?
Your sound's coming through great.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody. We're really happy to have you with us this afternoon. I look forward to this presentation and discussion. Just a little bit on introductions. My name's Peter Fissinger. I'm the president of Campbell & Company, and as president of our firm, we're really happy that over 250 people have registered for this webinar. So there appears to be real great interest in the topic of how to build a strong board. I think it's especially important in the times that we're facing right now. I am really pleased and feel privileged to have my fellow board member of the YMCA of Metropolitan Chicago and friend, Amy Carbone, joining me on this webinar. I just want to say a few words about Amy, if I could. First of all, Amy is an attorney who specialized in commercial litigation. She's now retired, and I first met Amy when she came to join the YMCA Metro Chicago board, and we ended up on the same committee, the Nominating and Governance Committee. Amy has also served on the Nominating and Governance Committee of the Adler Planetarium. She has recently joined the same committee as a member of the board of the Lyric Opera of Chicago. She's also a board member of the Smart Museum of Art and serves on the Advisory Council of the University of Chicago, her undergraduate alma mater, where in 2020 she was honored with an Alumni Service Award for her outstanding leadership. And Amy, I just want to thank you for joining us this afternoon.
My privilege, and thank you very much. I've been looking forward to this.
Well, let's get right into it. I have found in my really more than 30 years in development, as well as the 26 years that I've been with Campbell & Company, that the Nominating and Governance Committee is the lifeblood of any competent board. Our work with Campbell & Company is focused primarily on fundraising, but increasingly we've been asked by our nonprofit clients to help conduct a governance assessment. What we find is that when boards get into challenging times, and that could be whether they're trying to raise a significant amount of money in a campaign, when they're facing a crisis such as the pandemic, they really realize that one key to their success is that they have the kind of board that they need and want in order to nurture the mission of the institution. And this is, I have come to understand, a lot of work that can take years to do. And so, Amy, I'm just interested that you are now serving on the Nom-Gov committee, or have on 3 different boards on which you serve. What brought you to have a specific interest in this aspect of governance?
Peter, I totally agree with the message on this slide. Nominating and governance builds a team that pushes forward the mission of the organization, and the committee's work is to review that team frequently, at board meetings and beyond board meetings, and making sure that the talent that is needed universally is represented and refreshed as people cycle off or age off or become and part of a different community, choose a different organization to work with. So what the magic of NomGov is that it's like almost document based from the organization's from the board bylaws to the committee charters to the documents relating to roles and responsibilities of board members that are invited to join this mission-based work, to their review, and then to their input that they give through survey responses about their board engagement, whether they like or don't like it, or what parts of it they do or don't like about it. So it's that the interrelationship of all aspects of that work and the charter and the bylaws, every part of it working together, that makes the community of the board work together as a team.
Well, it's interesting for me. When I joined the Y board, I realize now it was almost exactly 10 years ago. I intentionally asked to serve on the NomGov committee because I was very interested in this aspect of governance and wanted to learn more. And I just want to say that I've learned a lot by serving on this committee, and especially under your leadership, because you've been so intentional in executing the fundamentals of how to build a board. And my experience as a consultant and as a member of this committee and board motivated me to write a short thought leadership piece. And we're going to run through the 10 aspects, perhaps, of how to build a strong board. Before we do, I just want to acknowledge that I learned a lot of this serving on the YMCA of Metropolitan Chicago board. And I think every board development exercise, you want to keep in mind the mission of the organization. So if you'll just bear with me and humor me, our audience, I want to read the Y's Chicago's mission. It's to develop strong children, families, and communities across metropolitan Chicago through academic readiness, character development, violence prevention, and fitness and healthy living. And so this is the mission that we think about when we're trying to build the Y board, and we encourage you to think about the mission of your organization. What is unique and special about it, and how does that have an impact on how you want to build your board? And then one last thing I'd say before we go forward is one of the reasons I think we've made great progress is the really significant staff support that we've received at the Y in executing these exercises that Amy and I are going to run through. And I want to thank Katie Panning-Spieth, the Chief Advancement Officer of the YMCA, and her staff for all the work that they've done to help us build the board at the YMCA in the way that we envision. And we want to take these fundamentals and help you think about your organization, whether it's a grassroots organization or a very long-standing, sophisticated institution. We still think these tools are useful and can be tailored to you, to what you want to accomplish for your board. And so, Amy, at the risk of stating the obvious, we have intentionally wanted to envision the board we wish to have. That's why I read the mission statement of the Y. What board do we wish to have? There's an old saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And so here are some of the things that you and I talked about in our preparation for this presentation, thinking about what kind of board does your organization need and why? Do we have a 3 to 5 year plan? Have we solicited input from the CEO and senior staff? And do we build for the future in increments, 6, 12, 18 months or beyond? Share with us how you have really thought about, with the Nominating Governance Committee and these stakeholders, what kind of board you wish to have, whether it's at the Y, the Adler, or the lyric where you've just stepped on this committee, and how that has motivated the work that you've led.
Thank you. The mission statement is the driver in so many aspects of the work the board does and board building. Another part of it is the board is in charge of setting the strategy for the organization. So every time the board reviews its strategic direction for whatever interval of time it is, a year, 3 or 5, the mandates for the NomGov committee exist in that strategy too. Like, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to get more, are we changing the thrust of an organization so that it becomes a turnaround environment? We need more financial talent, financial advisory talent to get better footing, or is it marketing and tech, media, social media skills to move like the YMCA into a different platform that we've not availed ourselves in the past? So it's a vision of the board that's needed to fulfill the strategic objectives set by the board, but also with an eye towards what other aspects are build the team, like the philanthropy, the corporate door openers, the funders that are not directly involved to the mission or to the strategy that's been set, but very important drivers to getting the mission forward in a community. And in looking at that, and looking at the inventory of people, which we do have a chart of expertise by career areas. We keep track of how many people might be within a category of accounting, advertising, banking, law, tech, government. Make sure that there's a balance in terms of what we need and who's represented. Keeping track, too, of the people that are towards the end of a career or moving out, making sure that we have another set of individuals ready to step in their shoes in a leadership way. We're asking for those that are going to be moving on to help identify people, just to keep a balance of the board, to make sure that just universally the board is helpful to the organization, to the leadership staff, the president, CEO, in doing the work that needs to be undertaken.
You know, Amy, I remember several years ago in a NomGov committee meeting, we talked about the need over time to try to make our board younger. And we, like many organizations, have an associate board, which is comprised mostly of younger people. Can you talk about how, as the leader of the NomGov committee, you've kept this in mind and some of the things that you have done and are doing to bring the average age of our board down over time?
Yes, that's absolutely, we've watched with the Y, the age creep up because our valued stakeholders have stayed with us. They contribute always, but we do want to make sure that we have leaders being added to the board that can step in later years. This age concern has always been twinned in the last 5 years with the DEI objectives, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And our efforts to reach into the community, like with corporate community engagement officers or funders, to ask their people who they could identify from staff as their rising stars, who is going to supplant existing leaders in their C-suites in the coming years, and can we have an audience with them, or would they identify those individuals for us so we could consider them as candidates? It also requires that we go to younger, Latinx young professionals organizations. I belong to Latinx, Black professional groups, to be able to go to receptions and events to meet people who are panelists or attendees that ask good questions, keep an eye on them in the community to know whether they are somebody that would be mission driven in the way that would be valuable to the YMCA or any other organization that I'm interested in filling ranks for.
Thank you. Let's move on and consider how important it is to have a clear role description for board members. And I know this seems so simple and elementary, and yet so often I have encountered board members who are well-intended, really want to make a difference, and it's just not clear to them what their role is. And so I think we want to try to handle this proactively, prospectively, in the earliest time that we talk with and encounter potential board members. So here are some of the questions that I'd like to explore with you. What is included in a good board member role description? What are the 2 or 3 things that you would say are most important to have in a role description when you sit down, and which you have many times with a prospective board member? And there's a quote here from the founder of our firm, Don Campbell, who used to always say to me, all good volunteers want to know who's supposed to do what by when. And if you can show them that, they'll do a great job for you. So what are the key things that you think need to be included in a role description for a board member?
This is great, Peter. I love this slide too. In the beginning, when I talked about the documents that underlie good governance for a board, one of those documents is this board description. The board description, the roles and responsibilities, in my view, need to be written down. It must be a document because it's an inventory of expectations that we have for a candidate to review before, as we talk to that candidate about his or her interest in joining the work of the Y, and then again as a check point at various times during a tenure of a board member to make sure that there is alignment between the expectations and in the activities of the board member. So included in the description is just a strong affinity for the mission, because we expect them to be an ambassador in the community for whatever work it is they've undertaken on behalf of the board and the organization. Mm-hmm. That they be committed to attending meetings. Frankly, the board has a 50%, the Y board has a 50% attendance requirement. Attend committee meetings to give a portion of a financial expectation, and then try to follow up with additional funds from other sources for total give and get monetary amount. And in the past years, because of the importance of the survey that's come into shaping the work the board does, to participate in the survey as an element of self-assessment. So those are part of the board member role description to fulfill each of those obligations. And in interviews, that document is given to a candidate. If something like too much travel would preclude attendance, then that's enough to say maybe you're not appropriate. Maybe it's not appropriate at this point. Maybe when you travel less, or there's a different opportunity you have that you are then able to fit us in. We'd love to have you then. Yet that friend still might be able to work with the Y in an ad hoc basis or an advisor capacity. So that description is extremely important.
In a few minutes, we're going to talk about an annual report card, as well as a survey of the board. And when I think about a strong role description and this upper right-hand box, how can the description be used effectively? I think we want to use the role description as a core piece in all of these other activities. And then what that does over time, looking at the lower left-hand box, is build consensus about what the board member's role is. And, perhaps, Amy, as importantly, what the board member's role is not. And so good board members know that, to your point, they have a commitment to the mission of the organization. They set strategic priorities in concert with the CEO. They retain and sometimes dismiss the CEO, but we don't run the organization. And so there's a line there for an effective board member. And I think the role description helps to undergird all of that understanding. Would you agree?
I would agree, and I would call it stay in your lane. Don't go into operations. Don't do day-to-day. Stay high, give advice when needed, lend your expertise, make the connections, participate financially. Don't get into the work of staff.
Anytime the role description should be changed, I know that you went to work to change the charter of the NomGov committee at one point. Have you thought about times that maybe we want to update or change the role description for a board member as we use it?
Actually, COVID has given us an opportunity where we did make a change in June, July of this year for NomGov because the financial effect of that pandemic is as yet even unknown, the impact of it. And for as much as we've required compliance with every one of the aspects of the role description, we wanted to also have some flexibility to recognize changed circumstances that we're all suffering from, and some suffering even more. Independent business owners, others whose market shares, like restaurateurs, just have been to the wayside with their customary earnings and ability then to contribute. And board membership really is best when there's commitment to the mission. And it's hard to find people that are really 100% aligned with the mission. And so every one of our over 40 board members is very valuable to us. And during this hopefully very temporary period, we wanted to make sure that there was a concession to the description relating to finances. So we've relaxed them for this period in the hopes that when everything gins back up again, they'll be able to participate. Maybe we can roll back our prior financial expectations on their behalf. So that would be an example where we've had to react to another circumstance with our role description.
And I think in most cases on the board, people have been able to maintain their commitment, and some people have been able to step up and provide additional support in these challenging times that we've had faced in the last year.
Yes.
I want to move forward and talk about the committee structure of the board. It was interesting for me personally that prior to my joining the Y board, our firm was retained by Y of Chicago. I didn't have any involvement in it, and to examine the committee structure of the board. And what motivated that is, I think, the belief that in order to have a great board, one has to have a sound committee structure. So talk a little bit about how you think about the committee structure of the board in your role leading the NomGov committee, whether it be here or at another organization, and maybe some of these points that are here on the screen, how you have sort of used these points as you brought people onto the board.
So actually, this would be universally applicable to the organizations that I've been involved with and are becoming involved with, that there is that inventory that I spoke of earlier of career expertise, like accounting, advertising, banking, all of those. And those expertise are not just important for the help, a consultative help that might be given to the CEO of an organization, but also to the work of the organization for standing committees, which would be finance, development. In the case of the YMCA properties, like real estate acumen is very important, media, NomGov. So in choosing board members' positions within these committees, we really do look at that inventory of career expertise and filling it, making sure that each of the standing committees, which are usually between 5 and 7 standing committees, are populated sufficiently to do the work to, again, just using, this is an unusual thing that the Y owns property. So we have, 20 campuses in between camps and local centers, to have people in real estate who understand the markets for real estate, the financing, the types of deals, who might be a buyer of locations, how we might acquire it, to have really top-notch industry expertise populating each one of these committees to help move the whole organization forward in its strategic missions. So when we interview people, we're also interviewing, like I said, that roles and responsibilities thing also has like what are we looking for? What we would like: finance, tech, social, media expertise. So we're interviewing in part to fulfill committee roles too. Like, where are we falling down in terms of having really hot talent that understands what needs to be done to take the YMCA, the Lyric, the Adler, whatever, to a different stage in its business. And just looking at the rest of the slide, that committee work is such a feeder for distinguishing between board members who are the next leaders, who participate in the committee members in meetings in a significant way, showing that they can lead people with what they have in terms of their expertise and how far-reaching their impact is within the board.
Yeah, I think the key to having an engaged board member is having a board member who's deeply engaged in their committee work. And there's another benefit to having a strong committee structure where the real work of the board is done on the committee level. And that is that when you go into the board meetings, you're in a position to talk about strategy. And this is what boards love to do, is to think about strategy. And so if the important committee work is done, we can sign off on those committee reports, know that that work is done and done well. All of the information is presented to us as board members in the pre-meeting materials, and we can have a board session that, inclusive of all that work, is thinking about our strategy into the future. And this is the best way, I think, to keep board members engaged. They're doing important hands-on work, and then they look forward to the board meetings because they know that there's going to be discussion about strategy, and they have the opportunity to participate. And I think we've been trying to intentionally and on an ongoing basis use our committee structure to have the board meetings be focused on strategy and not a long line of committee reports, which is the best way to put a bunch of board members to sleep, especially if we're having 7 a.m. meetings. Can you talk about how you've tried to participate in making the board meetings more effective through the way you help bring people to strong committees and then make sure that the committee work is meaningful?
Yes, I love the don't put them to sleep part of it, because that's what would happen if you had one committee report, another committee report at each quarterly meeting. So I think the important part of the board building aspect of it is to make sure board members get to know one another and to respect them in their respective fields of practice and expertise. So when a committee does work and move the ball forward, and then as part of the pre-meeting materials, there is a report from each committee about what they have done. There's so much integrity in those reports that under the one of our board chairs, Greg Nickley, who was the immediate past board chair, we were able to move all that stuff into a consent agenda portion at the very beginning of our board meetings so that it didn't need to be scrutinized. There was so much integrity with the groups that worked together to deal with an issue that we could, after review, individual review prior to the board meeting, vote to accept that or ask 1 or 2 questions about it, but then leave the remaining hour and 20 minutes worth of a meeting to the strategic aspect of the conversation. So that movement, making sure that the committees are filled with the best talent that work with leadership staff, the CEO and president, just to make sure we're moving the mission forward in the best way. It's very important.
Thank you. I want to let's talk for a minute about how important it is to proactively build a substantial pipeline of prospective board members. I have worked with nonprofit organizations that just have not gotten to the point where they have an active file of people that they're talking with. And as a result, sometimes the invitation onto a board can be pretty ad hoc. And believe it or not, this first bullet, how about my neighbor, I think he or she would be a great board member, has actually been the motivating force for many people to come on to nonprofit boards. And long term, that can be a recipe for disaster. I'm interested in hearing from you about how you've gone about building a strong pipeline and what some of the benefits are. I will say that we have a NomGov committee meeting Thursday morning. I looked through the materials yesterday, and I think there are 20 people in our pipeline right now, and they're not all going to end up on our board. Maybe they'll end up on some other great board. But talk about why this is important and how you have gone about developing a deep pipeline to give us some optionality in who we ultimately invite to serve on the board.
You're right. We do always have a high number of people that we can access some of them are ideas. When I think about pipeline development, the very best pipeline members, these are prospective candidates to be interviewed for board membership, are the ones that we have direct access to, either from NomGov committee members knowing them, or board members having recommended them, which is part of our survey. We do ask in our annual survey, do you have any, these are the specialty areas that we're looking for to board build. Do you have any ideas of people who we might be able to reach out to? So those direct contact and access candidates are the best quality. Also, another type of great quality are corporate leaders, like who are the civic for-profit organizations or companies or services firms who do want to have their representation on a large human services organization in the city. They want it like we want it. We keep track of who should we be reaching out to that could identify a candidate for them. And just a side note on this, that's precisely the kind of organization that I would go to their community engagement director, and along with Katie Spieth or any other development director you're working with, it's really good to door open with them, say who's on your staff that has shown an interest in this human service type mission work that you could recommend that's young, DEI helpful to us, it would be engaging, and then would have your support for us. So we have board identification, corporate identification. Then you go into the outer rings of the sourcing, which would be just like in Chicago, there's Crane's Chicago businesses. There are in other metropolitan areas that keep track of rising stars within industries on a weekly basis. One time it might be accounting, then it might be law, then it might be medicine or whatever. And keeping track of who are highlighted then in those publications as prospective proponents, those names being sort of like surfed with the NomGov committee and then wider board community to see if anybody has a connection to them, because access is also who's going to door open a conversation to somebody, say at Deloitte. Do you know a Deloitte partner that could give us access to this young rising star? Can we use that to get in and do our pitch to see if there'd be an interest in board candidacy? And then just watching general news, like who is moving headquarters into Chicago and will need to start developing a corporate presence in the nonprofit world, knowing who those are too. And some of these, in those latter categories, it's not necessarily the individual that we put in the pipeline that's there they might be regarded more as placeholders. So that's the type of person that we want. It might not be, I said Deloitte, or maybe it's not Deloitte, maybe it's Arthur Andersen, but they're a placeholder for, oh yeah, now when you canvass the board, when you canvass NomGov, they might say, okay, well, I don't know that person at Deloitte, but I've got one similar over here at Arthur Andersen. So there are a lot of different aspects to filling that pipeline, and each will percolate up as a need comes about. Like COVID, we actually needed somebody with healthcare expertise and community distribution of food and other like iPads and resources. We had somebody from United Healthcare on the board that had done that in Minneapolis 2 years ago for her job. And so it's just very nice to have a stream of, like a list of people that we can look at to see who's needed now and might be helpful in the future.
Thank you. And I just want to make a couple comments. First of all, in addition to that, I know that we have somebody on our board who works in a very large system. I won't name it, and this person is responsible for facilities, and so they have expertise in facility preparation. When we were able to reopen our Ys, and they were able to give us some help, that person was able to give us some help thinking about that. I think the strategies that you're articulating, Amy, speak to the nature of the Y and how it goes about building its board, in that we are an important human service provider in Chicago. These are tactics that can easily be adapted when you think about your pipeline. If you're a healthcare organization, if you are an educational institution, if you are an arts and culture organization, the manner in which you build your pipeline and the specific people that you're looking for, and therefore the tactics may vary, but it comes to that first slide that we talked about. What is the board that you envision for your organization, and then how do you build that into a structure so that you can execute over time? And that's the NomGov's role in all this. I want to add one other point. When you talked about executives new to town, your predecessor on the NomGov committee was a senior level executive recruiter based in Chicago. And I came to understand something that I had never really thought about before, that these people know who the new people are that have come into town and are serving in rising senior levels. And we've been able to beat some other organizations to the punch. And so when this person stepped down, we put another executive recruiter on our NomGov committee. And now that person has recently stepped off, so we may have to think about that again. But that's just a tip to think about in your community, that these folks have a knowledge of talented executives coming to town who might not yet have landed on a board and might be truly interested in serving on an organizational board that has a mission like yours.
Peter, can I say one more thing about that? Can I just break in with one more point about that? So, like, by sharing that tip or something, it's not, it doesn't cannibalize the work of anybody else looking at the new people coming to town, because it's very clear. Everybody's driven by a different interest, whether it is science, music, arts, human services. So we all are able to build these non-competitive pipelines, because there's so many people that are willing to help. You just got to find the ones that have the heart in what you do.
Thank you. I want to probably move forward a little bit here because we want to leave some time for questions. That said, it is stunning to me how many board members I've met in our work in Campbell and Company who were asked onto a board without any real individual meetings. And it's just hard for me to imagine, but it happens a lot. So talk a little bit about how you insist on intentional, to the degree possible, think about outside COVID, in-person meetings before we ever ask somebody to serve on the board?
So it's really, okay, so here's an admission. In interviewing somebody, I'm looking at the back end, which is this person going to be difficult to roll off? Like, I think we need to be looking at people committed to the mission, that get it, that are joining a team where all of them are working really hard, and we only want people who are going to be additive to that, not subtractive or neutral on it. We want everybody working together on this. And you can tell in those meetings why they're there. You know, it's like, oh, my neighbor told me to be here. We're not interested in that, because also by our bylaws, and a lot of organizations' bylaws, there's a cap to the number of people that we can ask to join us to do this work. So we really, really want only the very best. And we will not even work hard to make, we don't even try to meet the maximum of those people that we can invite on, because we're looking to the integrity and to the substantiveness of a candidate that comes before us. And you can gauge that by their meeting, by a face-to-face meeting, and having attended like the first meeting with the candidate and the second meeting with the candidate with the wider group from the Nominating and Governance Committee. It's interesting to me, those people that were, you know, just not understanding what the organization was about, those that were really interested, those that are really interested have done a lot of homework between meeting with me, you know, the development head, the president and CEO in that first meeting. And then by the time they're getting in front of a bigger group, if they are really hungry and interested in this, they know more about what you do than what you told them when you left the last time. And that's the kind of hunger that you can gauge over multiple meetings. In impressing them too in these meetings that it is an honor and privilege, in my view, to serve on a board, because it is these organizations live in the communities where they work, and people do know who the board members are, and they know what the responsibilities incumbent with board membership are in terms of being an ambassador, being a leader, being a giver, being a door opener. So people presume you are doing that. If you are on a board, you are presumed to be pulling your weight in those ways. So we want those people, and we try hard through these meetings to make sure that's who we get.
And I think high-functioning boards help board members feel like it's an honor to serve on the board. And so there's a chicken-egg aspect to all of this. I know that you've said to me recently that you want to get back to face-to-face meetings when we can. And I also want to just acknowledge that, like the rest of the world, we have been able to adapt to Zoom meetings and keep this personal outreach. I want to, just before we move on, I want to point out one thing that you told me, Amy, that I had never really thought about. You started this practice of bringing a new board member to the NomGov committee after we've already decided to invite this person. It's just a formality. They come on and we tell them about ourselves, and they say a few words, and then they jump off and we have a formal vote. And I thought, you know, we would never do that, and I don't think, and then not vote somebody onto the board. And you pointed out to me, and we're making a transition in the presentation here, that what this does is help a new board member feel like they know some people on the board before they attend their first meeting. And so there's an engagement strategy to that tactic that I had never appreciated since until you told me that when I asked you that question. I thought that was a really smart move. Just so now we're moving to having these board members in place, and effective board members are highly engaged, and just getting to that feeling of being, you're walking into a room that might have with staff as many as 50 people in your first meeting. We want strategies in place to help them feel welcome and to get them engaged quickly. So why don't you talk a little bit about the onboarding and orientation part and the responsibility that the NomGov committee has in helping to make that effective?
because it has no other place, because I've not mentioned it before. And one of the key things is having a board directory with pictures in it, so that over time, this new board member knows from the NomGov committee knows 7 people. And then after the first meeting, knows a dozen by face. So believe it or not, that photo directory of boards is very important as an onboarding tool. Now, back to what the committees and how it is helpful to engage new members, and you need to engage them immediately so that they don't drift away and feel that they are not being helpful when in fact they are vetted because they are going to be so helpful to the organization, is to make sure that the committee assignment is made immediately with their concurrence. It's what they want, and also the committee chair is totally on board with adding members to his or her committee. And that engagement of the committee chair with the new board member is critical, because now the committee is yet another universe of board members that they get to know. Could be 8 to 10 additional board members, and that's really a strong community. Another program that we've implemented is a mentorship program, which we asked a high-performing board member who really has been around the years of a calendar of a board and what the board does to coach this new board member for a year. Within a month of joining the board, the mentor will reach out to the new board member to set up a call. In today's environment, it's a call or a Zoom or FaceTime meeting to introduce themselves, share backgrounds, answer. This is the ask any dumb question you want. It only stays here. It's that kind of relationship to make sure that there is a safe place to ask what it really means. Like, for instance, if nonprofit board membership is new to this person, they need to be educated about the obligation or an expectation relating to donating to the annual fund. And surprise, surprise, right after that, there's going to be a dinner. You're going to have to pitch in for tickets on a dinner. And then every so often, there's a capital campaign. And to have somebody tell you, don't spin the wad there, or they're going to come back, or you're going to have to be asked in this way, just to get a lay of the land about what does it mean to be a board member of a nonprofit. And it's like, and these you're building in this board member just like these portable skills. That person, if you do it right, is going to be another very valuable board member to another organization. It's not competitive. It's let's make sure as a civic community we're all helping one another. So that is like the photo board director, the committee work, the liaison, or the mentorship.
Yeah, I think all boards also have their unwritten mores, and you learn them by accident along the way. And a mentor you just have a question like, why do we do things this way? And then hopefully they can explain that and just make you feel at home. I remember my mentor, when I joined the Y board, got me a cup of coffee before a meeting, and it was like this awkward exchange, and somebody kind of bumped into me and I bumped into him and I spilled coffee on him. So I got off to an inauspicious start, but somehow I managed to overcome that. Now we use an annual scorecard for all board members, and we share it with them. And it outlines the things that we expect of board members, and retrospectively over the course of a year, whether or not they were able to fulfill those. And so why do we do that, Amy? And what's included in it? And how do we use it to positive effect?
That scorecard is so important. It's just a set point in the board calendar where every one of us receives an inventory of what we have done this past year in terms of what was set out for us in the roles and responsibilities sheet, like what was our percent attendance at full board meetings, percent attendance at committee meetings, what did we give, what did we ask other people to give, did we participate in the survey, what leadership roles have we undertaken to serve. And the best, again, going back to the very first comments I made about how documents are so important, these bylaws set set terms for board members. And generally it's like 3 years or 5 years. So this annual scorecard, as they accumulate over each of the 3 years, if it's a 3-year term, really spell the success of a board member. If there is compliance and progress towards the expectations as inventoried on the scorecard, if they're willing to stay on, they are more than welcome to undertake to have another 3-year term. That scorecard, though, is helpful to put antenna up on somebody that's underperforming in an area. And if it continues and then the experience slides off, it's just a warning sign that everybody can agree on it's not a good fit. What an organization does with where that individual board member's interests aren't aligned, he or she might be better served or more interested in serving in a different type board. So at the end of a 3-year term, it most likely is a mutual agreement to roll off. So it's a midterm checklist and grade card for how performance is going.
Yeah, I remember one year I had traveled extensively and there were just a number of meetings that I missed, and I was surprised when I got my scorecard that I was just barely over the 50% meeting attendance requirement. And I just hadn't realized it. And getting a scorecard helped me think about it. I talked with my assistant and made the meetings a higher priority, and I was able to get back up over 80%. My point is, I think that busy people sometimes forget if they're maintaining all of the things that they said they would do as board members, and the scorecard is intended to help that. We also do, and this is something that we recommend as a firm to our clients, an annual survey to board members to get their input on all of the things that we've been talking about. And so I know that we've had the survey for well over 5 years. Just want to take a second a minute to talk about what we've learned and how we've used it to improve board member engagement. And then, you made an important point to me that self-reporting is the only way to legitimately gather data on board experience. So you've been very intentional about the survey, and just share with us a little bit about what you've tried to accomplish and some of the things that you've done in working with staff to have a good survey.
So I want to go to that last, since time's running down, and I want to get to questions. That self-reporting is especially important with respect to demographic information, gender, age, race, ethnicity, other abilities. Only the person responding can identify. It's not that the organization, I can't say whether somebody is a he or she or whatever. I can't say that. It is only the person. So that's a critical part of having a survey, is to make sure that you're getting a balance of what communities you represent and what funders expect you to be doing with respect to your board development in terms of getting all lived experience and other voices to the table. So that's just a quick point about a very important bullet on that point. The survey over the past 5 years is wonderfully in the values, because it's a tool to teach all of us how to be a better board members in meetings and in our conduct. The values for good board performance have gone up, because just like you gave the example of that annual scorecard telling you to be at more meetings, the survey too is teaching each of us, we need to engage with staff to find out more about programming so we can be a better ambassador. So what have we learned about this? We've learned that over the years, the board members have been happier with their engagement. They've become more respectful of the peers at their table, and are proud to serve with this board. The other aspect of it, it's always, as much as you and I and other non-gov members work at improving our DEI representation on our board, it's a very tough road, and our board holds our toes to the fire year after year after year for asking for more performance from us on that point. And tips for a good survey: get questions that are evergreen, that are reportable every year, that you can record. They're not idiosyncratic, they're not worded differently. Ask the same question year to year to year so that you can measure results that are comparable.
we want, for instance, board meeting engagement to be trending up over time, and the survey has allowed us to track whether in fact that's happening. I'm going to handle this next slide kind of quickly and just say that we found it to be in our work with Campbell & Company and at the Y, it's really important to learn how to move board members out when you need to. And I just want to say that all of these tools that we've talked about work together to have that challenging conversation. If somebody's seeing their scorecard and seeing that they're not able to attend meetings, maybe they're not meeting the philanthropic requirements, and to talk with them, is this the right board for you? And we want to get back to that. It's an honor to serve on a board, and we want to hold that standard high, and we want people to be willing and to feel good about maybe stepping off if they're not in the right place. There's a sort of ongoing debate about whether or not to have term limits as a tool. We're going to have to save that discussion for another time. It's a topic of great interest to me. But I think that if we do all of these things well, it allows us to really have a high priority on who we have on our board, and to be able to move people off effectively, because maybe it's just not the right time or place in their lives in order to serve on the board. Now, I know, Amy, you're really involved in the succession planning for board leadership at the Y. You want to talk about that for a few minutes, how you have gone about helping to prepare a slate of people, more than one, who might be future leaders of the board.
Sure. It's making sure that the people that are invigorated by their service as a board member and show a strong sense of what the mission is and strong interest in moving the Y or another organization forward, get opportunities to experience the work of the board in more than one committee, to make sure that we've moved them through, for example, the YMCA, making sure they know the nuts and bolts of the business by being a member of the programs committee, being a member of the development and advancement committee, and ultimately NomGov, to make sure that they are committee members, if not then committee chairs. We track that, the membership and leadership roles that they take, make sure that they've had experience with our annual dinner, fundraising, understanding the importance of that, make sure that the personal experience of each board member that shows an interest and inclination and ability to be a leader has the opportunities to do that. And we do that as a nominating governance committee. We review that every year. It's part of our charter that we'd be looking for board leaders, and then make those recommendations to the CEO and president when he or she is looking at a partner in terms of the board chair, who is a fit, and who among those board members are qualified to stand as a partner in that work.
Yeah, Amy, we have a board chair right now who was asked a few years ago if they'd be willing to serve, and their response was, I might be willing, but now's not the right time. And so I think just like having a pipeline of potential board members, we need a pipeline of potential leaders so that we have some optionality. And because we had a pipeline, we were able to go to one or more other really qualified board chairs who have done a great job. And now this other person is serving as chair. So having optionality by having more than one candidate, I think, is important. Molly, I didn't do a great job of leaving time for questions. Maybe we could just have one or two questions. And then I just want to say that any questions that have been submitted, I'll go through them and I'd be happy to answer them via email.
Thanks, Peter. First question, who administers or oversees the annual scorecard for board members?
Amy, who does that at the Y?
So because of the privacy and confidentiality of the information, it's not that NomGov sees every dollar that every board member gives. It lays in the hands of the development, the mission advancement person, the director of mission advancement, to prepare those type reports. And they too are the ones that keep track of meeting attendance. So it's in their files to go back to see who made each of the meetings.
Thank you. I do think we have time for one more question. What role
Sure.
does the CEO play in the interview process of potential board members?
That's such a great question, Amy. We actually chatted about this before the meeting. Why don't you talk about how important it is that the CEO be involved and how you keep the CEO in the mix in all of this work?
So the CEO, let's talk about the why again as an example. And actually, it's not. It's those that I've seen. Organizations usually have the first interview between the CEO and the development director, and then I might be brought in during that interview or the one after. It also could be a screening interview by the development director, and then the CEO, development director, and NOM chair, and then it goes to the wider NOM/Gov community. Now, the CEO is very important to whether there's a fit, both in the skill needs that prospective candidate brings, and a personality fit too. You know, it's unnecessary to have somebody who would explode the time of a meeting because they're not respectful of everybody else's time and the way they speak, like I am right now. And then to have the CEO involved too in the NOM/Gov committee meetings as attending and screening the members of the prospective candidates just as the members are.
Yeah, you know, at Campbell & Company, when we do this board development work, we strongly advise that the CEO be an active member of the NOM/Gov committee, because it's really, they are building a board with whom they will work very closely. And so their role in all of this is critically important. I'm just going to end by pointing out one other key fundamental to building a strong board, and that is to have a great chair of the Nominating and Governance Committee who thinks about all of these things so intentionally and executes over time. And Amy, you've done a great job for us at the Y. At Campbell & Company, I want to thank you for joining today and sharing your knowledge. And I know that the planetarium and the Lyric Opera have also appreciated your participation in their Nominating and Governance Committee. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for the opportunity. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you all. I will answer any other questions that came to us via email. And Molly, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Peter. I will just say to everyone, please look out in your inboxes for the email with the webinar recording and slides, and get in touch with us if you have questions. We also encourage you to sign up for future Campbell & Company webinars. Next up is Fundraising Communications 3, Preparing Volunteer Leaders to Serve as Ambassadors, on March 3rd. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.